Finally, Spyro Reignited Trilogy is actually here. I've been wanting a remake of the original Spyro trilogy for such a long time, and I'm holding it in my hands. It's a thing that exists, and I have it. Oh, I can't tell you how happy I am to see this. Not only because I freaking love those games, those are easily some of my favorite games of all time. Like all three of them are at least top 15. But Spyro's back after how many years?
The Spyro series has been dead for quite a while. The last main Spyro game was A Hero's Tale back in 2004, so it's been 14 years. Now there was two different reboots, being The Legend of Spyro and Skylanders, but honestly those games aren't Spyro. I can't speak for the actual quality of these games. I only put in about an hour into a New Beginning and haven't touched anything else. But what I can say is they have absolutely nothing I've come to love about the series. I know both of these series have their own fans and that's great, but it's not what I personally want from Spyro. No. This right here is.
For the longest time, I didn't think Spyro would actually come back. Activision seemed pretty content with keeping Spyro and Skylanders, and platformers were kind of dead, but then E3 2016 happened.
Shawn Layden walked on stage with a very familiar shadow and even more familiar song in the background.
Yeah, that's right.
Crash Bandicoot was back, and that got me screaming with joy. I was excited for two reasons. One, Crash is back, and two, if one PS1 platforming franchise by Activision can come back, why not another?
After a couple of years of speculation, tons of different signs were pointing to it happening. Activision saying they plan on reviving some old IPs after Crash's success, the Falcon McBob, Spyro Twitter, Laura Kate Dale, and it all ended off with a Dragon Egg hunt. Finally, on April 5th, 2018, it happened. A foreign Amazon website leaked the name, cover, and screenshots 12 hours early.
Yeah, I briefly mentioned this back in my Spyro 1 video, but this game was so thoroughly leaked that I wasn't as excited as I felt like I should have been. Yeah. Thanks, Amazon.
But hey, the marketing definitely helped keep that hype up. Seeing Activision use the fact that we knew about the Spyro Twitter sooner than we should have was pretty cool. And they even used the fan hashtag #UnleashTheDragon. But of course, I can't forget to bring up the Spyro drone. They made an actual fire-breathing Spyro drone to fly across America to deliver a copy of the game to Snoop Dogg. I swear I'm not making that up, that really happened.
Everyone is getting that Snoop sizzle out here, baby.
Spyro raced in the swamp, got a lovely view of the city, chased some sheep, and rode a subway. Anyway, this is honestly my favorite marketing stunt ever. I'm so happy I live in a world where this actually happened.
So I think I talked about the events leading up to this game enough, so I should probably talk about the game itself, right? Well, before I do, I should make something clear. I've already covered the individual games in detail in their own separate videos, so I'm not going to be doing that again. This video is going to be about the changes Reignited Trilogy has brought and whether or not I think they're good. If you want to see my opinions on the individual games, check out my reviews. Though, just so you know, they were my earliest videos, and even though they weren't that long ago, I feel like they've already improved a lot. So, yeah, don't expect the same quality you're getting here. And lastly, this video is going to have spoilers because I'm assuming everyone watching has already played these games.
Spyro Reignited Trilogy is a remake of Spyro the Dragon, Spyro 2, Repto's Rage, and Spyro Year of the Dragon. Developed by Toys for Bob, with Sanzaro Games handling the third game, and of course Activision as the publisher. Gameplay-wise, I think Reignited made the transition just fine. More than fine, actually. The controls have seen a massive improvement. They give you a lot more control compared to the original games. Charging and even just walking feel much nicer. I especially love the charge, it somehow feels even more satisfying than the original. Bursting through a line in the chest and enemies especially feels great. It just feels more impactful thanks to the extra effects they added. I noticed that turning is a little stiffer, but that didn't bother me personally. They also added a thing where if you bump into a wall while gliding, Spyro bonks into it, and I don't know why I love doing this so much. I'm also very pleased to say that the roll is not only in Spyro 1, but also 2 and 3. It's still pretty pointless, but I still love messing with it. Overall, I really love these controls, and I think they're the best Spyro has ever controlled. And is even better than the original trilogy, which is saying a lot because I already thought those games controlled great. But they didn't have the level of tightness this game has. I do have a few issues though. The slide in Spyro 3 kinda sucks. You only ever do it twice, so it's really not that big of a problem. Except for Haunted Tomb. That slide kinda sucks hard. As far as I can tell, you have to bump into this wall right here just to slow yourself down. Otherwise you're gonna go so fast you're gonna fall. This wasn't the case in the original. I don't know what happened here. Another small annoying thing is if for some reason if you collect an egg in Spyro 3, Spyro's controls screw up for a few seconds afterwards. I never got used to that and I kinda hate it. A more major problem I had was the glitches. I personally didn't have anything happen to me at all in Spyro 1, though I've seen some pretty crazy things from other people. Like a friend of mine fell off Dr. Shemp's arena and he got stuck between two walls. This seemed pretty minor because he was able to get out easily, but like, how did they miss that? That seems like a super easy thing to find in testing. Spyro 2 was a little less polished for me. Bombo got stuck in the air in the third phase, and it took me a while to realize why he wasn't in the third flag. I also fell in Winter Tundra, misremembering where a platform was, then I respawned in the ground.
These glitches are pretty minor, in my opinion at least. They're pretty forgivable. Though that was just me. I've seen some other people have some pretty major glitches, and even a glitch that prevents you from 100%ing the game, and that... wow. That's pretty bad. And these glitches didn't affect me too much personally until I got to Spyro 3.
Not too many glitches happened to me in Spyro 3 either, only a few, but they were far worse than the ones I encountered in 2. First off, I died instantly in Charm Bridge despite being at full health, and if that doesn't sound like a big deal, the next two are. This happened to me in Molten Crater Sergeant Bird level. I never expected there to be a screamer in a Spyro game. This is a pretty nasty glitch. I had to kill myself just to get my vision back. And then it happened again. I had to collect the gems blind and then kill myself again. Then if that wasn't bad enough, Charm Bridge and Fireworks Factory were running about 80% of the normal speed. That's kind of awful. And no, this has nothing to do with the fact I'm playing on a PS4 Slim and not the Pro. Power has nothing to do with it. These levels just run poorly sometimes. These glitches are easily the biggest problem in this game and proves that this game was rushed hard, not in the levels of Enter the Dragonfly, but closer than I would want. Thankfully patches are a thing now, so I guess these things will eventually be fixed, but I would have liked it if I didn't have these problems to begin with. To be clear to anyone watching, this probably isn't Toys for Bob's fault. Activision are the ones who rushed the game. I mean, they outsourced Spyro 3 to Sanzaru Games, likely because Toys for Bob didn't have the time to make it themselves. I'll give Activision some credit though. They did delay the game once, so they're not completely greedy. So please, Activision, release the patch soon. Speaking of patches...
So unfortunately, this game requires a huge patch, being 20 gigs, to play most of Spyro 2 and 3. And the reason being is because the game as a whole is 67 gigs, and a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One disc can only hold up to 50. Now, I don't like this for a couple reasons. One, this means you need internet to play the game, and that's obviously not an issue to me, but internet can be insanely expensive if you live in the wrong area, and as someone who is a massive fan of the series, I don't want anyone to be locked out of playing this game, ever. I want as many people to play this game as possible, so having internet being required kind of makes that hard. And my other issue is game preservation. When the PSN and Xbox Live servers go down, then you can't play Spyro 2 and 3 anymore. I mean, you can if you already have it downloaded, but if you want to get into the game later, then you can't. I know ports of this game are inevitable, maybe ones that contain the entire package, but I still consider the initial release to be pretty important when it comes to, the history of the series. So, yeah, this sucks. And so how would I fix this? Well, install discs are a thing, and that would have made everything so much easier. Now, I know that asking for an install disc is a lot for a $40 game, but controversial statement, this game shouldn't be $40. It has so much content in it, and the fact that it exceeds 50 gigs to me makes me think this should have been a $60 game. But since Insane Trilogy was $40, I guess they wanted to keep it the same price. So yeah, I don't think this game should be $40 to begin with. If it was $60, then we would have a disc, and the cost for the games would probably be covered better because they put a lot of effort in this, even though it is kind of, glitchy.
Oh, but I don't want them to patch every glitch. Some are just harmless fun. Keep those. I also thought the gems were way too small, leading to many occasions where I missed a gem or two, or several. As nice as the graphics are, the individual blades of grass just made this even worse. Grass and bushes became my worst enemy in this game. I'm not saying I never missed gems in the original, no, I do that all the time. But every level? No. I didn't have this problem nearly as much in Spyro 3, so maybe I got used to it. Either way, gems were far more visible in the originals, and that's definitely a point in favor of the originals. The fact Sparks doesn't always pick up gems makes this even worse. I know that's a problem in the original games too, but it definitely wasn't this common.
But this actually wasn't as bad as you might think. You know why? The gem finder. Yeah, that's more of a band-aid solution than an actual solution, but it still makes it better.
That's right, the gem finder is in all 3 Spyro games from the get-go, meaning you no longer have to unlock it in Spyro 3. The only downside is that that one Sparks level doesn't have any kind of upgrade anymore. Which, I mean, it's disappointing, but whatever. Having it from the get-go in Spyro 3 makes the game a lot more enjoyable to me, since they got rid of those spending an hour looking for one red gem moments, and having a Spyro 1 at all is fantastic. My only problem with it is in the original Spyro 3, if you were in a sub-area with no gems, Sparks would react accordingly and say there's no gems. But in Reignited, he only does that if there's no gems in the current level at all. And he'll point to the sub-area that has the gems. Which I think it makes things a lot more complicated, because unless you're right by the portal, you don't know if Spyro is pointing to a nearby gem or the portal. Basically, it was much easier to tell if you cleared out an area in the original, but that's really not a huge deal. One last thing I need to bring up regarding Sparks. The light in the DualShock 4 actually changes depending on what color Sparks is. It goes yellow, blue, green, and then red. It's a tiny detail, but I love it. Another thing from Spyro 2 that carried over all 3 games is the map. Yeah, I never talked about that in my Spyro 2 video. I was going to, which is why you see in some of my earlier footage. I just forgot to talk about it. It's something I never used, and I don't see why someone would. Spyro stages are pretty easy to navigate. They all have landmarks, and they're normally pretty linear. But hey, if you need a map, it's in all 3 games now. It's not something I'd ever use, but I still appreciate Toys for Bob adding in regardless. If for some reason the map doesn't give you enough direction, they added floating orbs above the NPCs that give you the orb challenges in Spyro 2. I really didn't think it was necessary, but whatever. Though for some reason they didn't add this to 3, and I really don't get why. I guess it's because it was rushed. They got rid of the double jump glitch in Spyro 2, and I mean, I guess I didn't expect them to keep it, but I'm still gonna really miss it. I think a good compromise would have been to make it a 100% reward in all 3 games, but make sure to add a bunch of invisible walls to prevent boundary breaking. I mostly use it as a convenience thing anyway, aside from 100% in Glimmer early. I can't tell you how dirty I felt when I did it 100% Glimmer on my first visit. That really made me miss the double jump. Though apparently you can still do that, but I didn't know that when I recorded. Some may find the camera to be one of the bigger improvements because you can now use the right analog stick to move the camera wherever you want, which is great for most people. I tried it for 10 seconds and decided I hated it. I personally prefer using the triggers for the camera, which thankfully you can still do that. You just have to change the control scheme to retro. I personally feel the shoulder buttons work better for Spyro since you never really need to move the camera anywhere but left or right. And the shoulder buttons prevent you from having to move your thumb away from the 4 face buttons. I will admit I still use the extra camera control for some situations, but it was rare. I also probably prefer playing the game that way because that's how I've been playing it for the last 17 years of my life. I mean, I still use the D-pad in Crash 1 and Insane Trilogy, even if I'm playing the Switch version with its not D-pad. I really should bring this stuff up. The camera was mostly good, though I did have a few big issues, especially in the Tiki Lodge in Spyro 3. Whenever I got too close to the ceiling, which you have to do in some parts, the camera would look directly down, and that really sucked. It made this part way harder for all the wrong reasons. This area just sucks now. That was the same level that really nasty glitch happened to me. A couple more minor issues would be for some reason the camera doesn't zoom out for certain challenges like it did in Spyro 2 and 3. I actually didn't think this was that big of a deal for Spyro 2, but it definitely was in Spyro 3, Jesus Christ. Spooky Swamp's Firefly Bomb mission. Oh man, that one's bad. The rocks don't even respawn anymore, and it makes it feel even more unfinished. I'm really starting to think this game should have been delayed again. And I never once had a problem with a mission where you protect that ice skater from the Rhinox. Until now, thanks to the lack of camera zoom out. The speedways also have a nifty camera. It was mostly a problem in Spyro 1. This crap wasn't too common in the sequels. The speedways control a little too loose for my taste. I found myself accidentally flying into the water on more than one occasion, something I almost never do in the original. After I got used to the new controls, it didn't become much of a problem anymore, until Harbor Speedway in Spyro 3. Remember how I said I didn't lose a single race in my Spyro 3 video? Well, Reignited fixed that with loose controls, making the boosters a lot more scary to use, and I once again was falling to the water repeatedly. The skateboarding in Spyro 3 could be a little better. I think the actual ground movement is fine. I think Spyro controls pretty alright in the air. My problem with it is wiping out is either too hard to do on purpose, or too easy to do on accident. If you go straight at the wall, I'd say there's about a 50% chance you'll actually fall. I mean, look at this. Doing tricks is more dangerous than it should be. There was so many times where I felt like I landed just fine, but the game apparently disagreed. I eventually got used to it, thankfully. It happened just in time too, because I actually didn't have too much trouble with the final skateboarding challenge in the super bonus round level. The extra characters in Spyro 3 control pretty alright. I like how Sheila feels more like a kangaroo, there's more bounce to her movement, but I think she should have been a bit faster. I love how Sergeant Bird controls, they got rid of that weird momentum issue I mentioned, so he feels way more smooth. My only complaint is I think he's a little too heavy, but it's not a huge issue. Bentley controls about the same, I think he might be a little faster, which is nice. But for some reason the camera isn't centered on him, and I'm not a huge fan of that. Agent 9 got a massive upgrade. If you're a normal person who plays with the new controls. I'm not. I'll get into that later. He now controls like an actual third-person shooter, unlike the clunk that was the original. However, if you're using the original control scheme, then you still have to use circle to shoot, and unless you have claws for hands, that's a massive issue. It's the R trigger if you're playing with the new control scheme, and that's great, but seeing how you can't play with the original Agent 9 controls, I don't see why they made it the circle button still. Like, did they not realize how big of an issue that is? Obviously, I can just go to the menu and change it to the reignited controls, but I feel like I shouldn't have to do that. Like, there's absolutely no reason why it should be circle if you're using the retro control scheme. Who would want to play a third-person shooter while using circle to shoot? That's awful. But of course, most people probably won't touch the retro controls, so it's really only an issue to me. The Doom levels have also been modernized, but they have that circle button issue too if you're using the retro controls. Aside from that, Agent 9's playstyles are pretty much the same. Sparks' gameplay is also exactly the same, so unfortunately no twin stick options. But the original control scheme really isn't bad, I just would have liked twin sticks. So yeah, really only Sergeant Burr and Agent 9 have seen any massive upgrades. But to be fair, I don't think you can upgrade the other playstyles too much without making them feel way too different. Regardless, I still see these levels as the low point in this trilogy. But wait, the Bentley Boxy minigame is okay? Oh my god, yes! I still wouldn't call it good, it's just kind of there, and most new players will probably forget it exists, but that's still a massive step up from the original trilogy. The bosses in Spyro 1 are completely unchanged from what I can tell. They're all still pretty lame, but this remake aims to be as faithful as possible, so I guess I can't complain too much. Spyro 2's fights seem largely unchanged. The only difference I noticed is Crush only whacks his club if you get too close. Well, in the original it was on a timer, so it's a little harder. Spyro 3 made it so you can't cheat on Buzz anymore, but it really doesn't make the fight that much harder. It's definitely not Dark Souls like some are claiming. Spike is so much easier now. He's honestly the hardest fight in the original trilogy, but he's also the second fight in the game, so it was kind of a massive difficulty spike. The fact they made him easier is good, because why was the second fight also the hardest? Probably the most interesting part of any remake would be the graphical differences, and I gotta say, wow. I'm sure everyone watching this has heard the phrase, "looks like a Pixar movie." I don't think that has ever applied to any game more than this. I still think the original games look good, especially for the time, and I think there's a certain charm to the older look thanks to the use of color and surprisingly well-detailed textures, but I'd be lying if I said this game is an absolute eye candy. The individual blades of grass, the added details like the windmill and blowhard or the crowd in the hockey rink in Colossus, the lighting, the sun rays, and so much more. This game is so gorgeous. However, it's not perfect. The added detail can add problems. I already mentioned the grass can hide gems, but there's also this problem I encountered in Wizard's Peak. There's this part where you have to glide around the mountain and land on the platform. The problem in Reignited is they made the mountain way too rocky, so now you can't even see the platform you're supposed to land on when you can in the original.
So I know these games pretty well, so I knew to glide around that mountain. Kinda. I mean, I was pretty sure, but I wasn't 100%. I haven't died at that point, and I wanted to keep that trend going. So I was kind of scared. But I did it, and it was there. But that still sucks because, you know, I knew where it was because I know Spyro 1 really well, but then a new player won't because it's obscured.
I'm also not a fan of some of the color choice in a few different stages, mostly in Spyro 2. Idle Springs in the original was more orange with some purple, and I thought it was one of the prettier stages in the trilogy. Now it's more yellow and gray, making the whole stage look a lot more dull color-wise. I'm not a fan of Fractured Hills having a stone lower level. I don't think it stands out as much as the original's dirt, and Mystic Marsh doesn't even resemble its original version at all. As for Spyro 1, the only change that comes to mind is Misty Bog. It's a lot brighter than the original, giving it a very different tone. Spyro 3, on the other hand, the only stage I noticed had very different colors was Spooky Swamp, and I actually like this look more. Everything's a lot greener, including the water, giving the whole stage a much murkier feeling. Which I like, it's a swamp. Looking at the original, it's kinda odd how blue and clean the water looks. So this is one change I like. However, I don't think any of these things matter that much. I'm a hardcore Spyro fan, so of course I'm gonna notice these changes, but literally anyone else won't care, especially if you've never played Spyro before. These stages still look good in their own right, I just think that you could have looked better. Though I should point out, those were the only stages I had problems with. The overwhelming majority of them look phenomenal. Some highlights to me are Dark Hollow, Blowhard, Dark Passage, Aquaria Towers, Autumn Plains, Morning Springs, and Charmed Ridge, aside from the fact that the game ran at 80% of the normal speed. Even though that was a glitch, don't expect a completely smooth experience out of this game. Yeah, unfortunately this game has some performance issues. There's constant frame skipping, drop frames, and a heavy amount of motion blur. I personally don't care all that much about those things, as I never thought it got bad at all, but I do know that some people have a very strong distaste for motion blur. Some even saying that they feel sick from it. So an option to turn it off would have been very much appreciated. The only time the frame rate got really bad for me, or I guess at 2 times, were Charmed Ridge and Fireworks Factory. I already talked about that earlier, so I'm not going to talk about it again. Other than that, the performance is far from bad, but it's definitely problematic. Another graphical aspect I should talk about are the redesigns, and I really like most of them. Probably the best ones are the dragons in Spyro 1. In the original they were all palette swaps of each other, now everyone has a unique model, and I love all of them. Some love them a little too much. A lot of these dragons are only on screen for 2 seconds, yet someone spent hours drawing out their designs, then modeling and texturing them. And I can't not admire things like that. I really like how they're all themed around the homeworld they're in. The ones in Artisans all have something to do with various forms of art, and other things of that nature. The dragons and magic crafters all wear magic related things. Oh my god, I love the ones in Dreamweavers. They all have these really cool, surreal designs. I especially love the ones in Dark Passage. Some other redesigns I love are Hunter, Moneybag, Zoe, Bianca, and even all the extra characters in Spyro 3. Yes, even Sheila. People seem really divided on Sheila's new design, and it's the hair. I like it. It helps that she has the best hair color, red. No bias. Though I can definitely see why others might not like it. Adding hair is a pretty big change. Though no matter how you look at it, she needed some kind of redesign because in the original she was just a kangaroo. One of my favorite new looks is Nasty Nork. Ganassi is looking pretty gnarly. Yes, I have indeed been holding in that joke since he was revealed. The redesigns I'm not as keen on really only have one thing I dislike about them. Other than that, they all have something else I really love about them. Like, I love how much more dinosaur-like Ripto is, but he's really scrawny and I much prefer his chubbier PS1 look. This one's gonna anger a few people. Alora. She has a good design, okay? I just liked how the top half of her was human in the original, kinda like a centaur. It gave her a much more mystical feeling. Now she's only a fawn. Sparks? His eyes freak me out. Okay, never mind, he's adorable. Finally, Spyro himself. I love the way they did his horn scales, and I especially love how his face is still blocky, but I don't like how big his body is. That's right, I'm fat-shaming Spyro. I just don't think he looks right, especially from certain angles. Though I didn't really notice it during the gameplay, so I honestly don't care that much. And I still overall like this design, I just like the original more. The voice acting is pretty top-notch. They even got Tom Kenny back for Spyro. I seriously didn't expect that, but I'm so happy they did. His new take on Spyro is a bit different. He sounds younger and, well, Yeah, that makes sense. This is probably the best Spyro has ever sounded. Greg Berger also came back to reprise his role as Ripto, and again, I think he sounds better than the original. He sounds even angrier, and if you've ever seen my Spyro 2 video, you know that's why I like Ripto so much. Oddly enough, Greg Berger did not reprise his role as Hunter, instead we got Robbie Damon. He isn't bad at all, but for the original trilogy, they really should have just used Greg Berger. It's upsetting to me that they have him, but didn't use him for this biggest role. The Professor, Agent 9, and Sparks also have their original voice actors, and they sound exactly the same, which is a very good thing. I like their original voices. Everyone else has new voices, and I really like all of them actually. Bianca, Ganasty, the Sorceress, and pretty much every NPC all sound great to me. Except Juliet is no longer voiced by a man, and I don't know if I can cope with that. Aside from that, the delivery in every line is pretty good. The biggest change I think would be the classic "I'm a fun you dork" line by Alora sounds way more playful, which I like. She was oddly rude in the original. I also like the delivery on Bianca's taunt to Spyro a lot more. The acting just sounds a bit less forced. But unfortunately, Hunter talks like a normal person. I'll miss the old
Incredible!
Hunter. Lastly, remember how Hurricos was comprised entirely of monotone SpongeBobs? Well, that's unfortunately no longer the case, but we at least have a high-pitched Sonic.
Thank you, Spyro. I found this shiny thing mixed up with our lightning stones. Please, take it as a reward.
When it comes to sound effects, I think most of things transition pretty well. I really love the new gem sounds, and I appreciate the fact that Spyro 1 gem sounds are still different than the ones in 2 and 3. The Spyro 1 1-up sound effect is very faithful recreation, and Sparks' crunch noise is still super satisfying to me. I do have a few nitpicks though. The monks in Colossus no longer do the chant anymore. The Calyx and Zephyr no longer make those amazing distressed cow noises. And finally, no screaming bunnies.
I'm not even kidding when I say that's the sole reason why Midday Garden is no longer my favorite homeworld in Spyro 3.
All of these things are super disappointing to me, but it's obviously not a huge deal. Finally, there's the music. I think it's a mixed bag. Stuart Copeland actually did return for this game, but from my understanding, he mostly just oversaw the production of the soundtrack. But he did create the title screen theme, Tiger Train. It's a remix of the title screen themes from Spyro 1, 2, and 3. It's the song I played in this video's intro. I love how the soundtrack retains that Spyro feel I mentioned back in my first video, but I just don't feel a lot of the songs pack the same punch as the original. Dark Hollows and Breeze Harbor's main melody doesn't stand out as much as the original, so they kinda just blend into the background instruments more than I'd like. There's a lot of remixes here that just aren't as exciting to listen to, like Aquaria Towers or Hurricos. The credits theme in particular is probably my least favorite remix in the game, and probably the only one I outright dislike. The others I just don't like as much. Though I did call it a mixed bag, implying there's remixes I like or even prefer. Artisan, Stonehill, and Midnight Mountain are just a few remixes I like more than the originals. One of the bigger upgrades to the soundtrack I think would be Enchanted Towers. The original was just Sgt. Bird's theme, and it still shares the same melody, but it's a lot more serene and dreamlike. I love this because it helps make it more unique without making it too different from the original. Well, I guess the biggest upgrade would be the final boss theme in Spyro 3 because it isn't just Sunrise Spring anymore. One detail I really like about the soundtrack is that it's dynamic, meaning it gets more fast paced when you're bursting through baskets or enemies, or becomes more peaceful, slow paced, and loses most of its instruments when you stand still. But if for some reason you don't like it, you can turn it off.
And if you don't like Reignited soundtrack, that's fine. You know why? You can switch to the original soundtrack. That's amazing. I'm so happy they included that. And I remember being really disappointed when Insane Trilogy didn't.
I personally didn't play with the original soundtrack because, you know, I was making a video and I wanted to give this soundtrack a shot. Though just because I like a good chunk of the remixes and I especially love the dynamic soundtrack, maybe I'll continue playing with Reignited's music, I'm not sure. The cutscenes and animations to me are really something special. They're full of these neat little touches, like remember how in my Spyro 1 video I said I'd assume the opening cutscene is on a TV? Well, I guess that assumption was correct. I always thought it was kind of jarring how they definitely implied it was on TV, but you never actually see one. The animation is also a lot better. Just look at Ripto, he's so fun to watch. I mean, every character is animated better. I just like Ripto a lot, okay? However, I do think some things look a little worse. The orbs no longer bounce in Spyro 2, and I'm still heartbroken about that. The skeleton in Skiless Badlands and Enchanted Towers does the floss. The pandas in Bamboo Terrace dab. Okay, I think they're actually sneezing, but it looks like a dab, so yeah, get rid of that. And I don't like some of the Spyro 2 intro and outro cutscenes as much. Only two come to mind, but I really don't like what they've done to these two. The intro cutscene in Colossus was my favorite, but I don't think it's as funny since the monk now reacts to the other one being eaten by a Yeti. I thought it was a lot funnier when the monk just stared blankly at the goat. I also don't like how they censored out the explosion in Zephyr's intro cutscene. Actually, censorship seemed to have hit this game in some odd ways, most notably the guns. In Spyro 1, I assumed it was a creative decision because the Norks in Twilight Harbor used goo guns, and they made Twilight Harbor a goo factory. I mean, I still don't like that. I like how the enemies used cartoony things throughout the whole game. But then, suddenly, guns. Like, actual guns. It made that level feel way more hardcore. But I no longer think the change was a creative decision because there's also no guns in Spyro 2. The guys in Scorched used these slingshots instead of guns, but they kept the guns in Dino Mines? Whatever. They also changed Bombo. You remember Bombo, right? That Islamic guy in a flying carpet that throws bombs?
Oh. You know, I think I get why they did that now.
What's funny about it is that the only thing they changed was his name. It's Bob now. They dropped one letter. He'll always be Bombo to me. There's a few other examples I already mentioned, like Juliet now being voiced by a woman, and the lack of bunny screams. Well, I get these changes except for the guns, I'd still prefer to keep it the way it was. I'll miss the Bombo and Juliet I know. But at the very least, they did keep the most important thing. The Nork cheeks. Probably one of my favorite returning things is the cheat codes. All of them are back. Big head mode, flat mode, the squid skateboard, and all of the color variants too. I especially love doing the rolling glitch while blue.
Rolling around at the speed of sound. Got places to go, got my rainbow. Can't stick around.
Another thing that's worth noting, aside from some really minor stuff, there really isn't any new content. I mean, Spyro 1 now has skill points, so that's kinda neat. Unfortunately, there's no new epilogue in Spyro 1, and what's even worse, Spyro 2 and 3 don't have an epilogue at all. Instead, you just get concept art for all three games for getting every skill point. I mean, it's really nice looking art, but I'll really miss the epilogue. Along with the skill points, there's obviously trophies, or achievements if you're playing on the Xbox One. Spyro 1 wasn't too hard to platinum, I just had to go on my way to get a good chunk of the trophies. And Spyro 3 was the easiest platinum I've ever gotten. I got all but 2 naturally. Spyro 2 was the only one that gave me any trouble at all. Beating Bombo without taking a hit took me some time purely because I took it really slow, and killing every Earth Shaker in Fracture Hills meant I had to do the Alchemist mission again, and there really isn't anything new that's also substantial. No new levels, no new challenges. They didn't even redesign Nasty's world to make it a full hub world. What's even more odd about all this is Spyro 1 still ends out with the "oh no, here we go again" moment, which obviously Spyro 2 never follows up on. But considering the fact that this is not only a remake but also a collection, it's super jarring, even more so than the original. Toys for Bob have been pretty coy when it comes to the idea of putting in some female dragons, which, yeah, how do they reproduce? Anyway, so I guess the floodgates for DLC has been open. Or in this case, the door has been open for DLC because there's this new door in Artisans that reacts to your charge, and even leads to an empty room. I know it could easily just be a decoration, but the fact that it wasn't there in the original leads to a room when they could have easily just used a black texture to cover up the space in between the cracks, and reacts to your charge. Yeah, that room will definitely have a portal in it in a later date. I mean, Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy had Future Tense, a completely new level for Crash 3, so why not?
So I guess I'm finally done with Spyro Reignited Trilogy, and I mostly love it. Yeah, the lack of polish really holds this game back. If this game were to get a patch that fixes most of the actually really bad glitches and makes the camera pan out for those missions, this would be really something special. As it stands, it's only a few steps away from being amazing. But would I recommend it? Yeah, definitely. I mean, despite the lack of polish, I actually still think this game is really good. And these things will most definitely be patched. And you still, no matter how you look at it, you still get 3 amazing games lovingly remade in a single package for $40. That's pretty good. I just really hope that patch comes soon. Please, Toys for Bob and Activision. I want it. So aside from the whole, playing it part, this game makes me so happy to exist for a variety of reasons. A ton of people are getting into Spyro for the first time, and even one of my friends, and I couldn't be happier about that. And what's even cooler, the thought of little kids growing up with this game and having the same memories and nostalgia I have for the original PS1 games. That's kind of why I love remakes so much, especially remakes of games that, or game series that have been dead for a while. And I think it's safe to say that Spyro's back and we will get a new Spyro game. And assuming Activision gives Toys for Bob the proper time, whatever they end up putting out, I think will actually be something special, and I cannot wait for that. And I will drop whenever that does happen, I will drop everything to cover it. This series is truly something special to me. In case you haven't noticed, I've been doing it for 7 months now. Speaking of which, yeah, I'm done with Spyro finally. God, it took me forever. I'm sorry it took me so long to make videos. The first 3 videos I used a crappy editor and it just wasn't fun. Now I have a good editor and I have had a good editor for a couple months, but the last couple videos it took longer for other reasons. This is the first video that I made in about 2 weeks. At least that's my plan. I haven't started editing yet. Before I end this video, I should say I do plan on covering Spyro again in the future. Either the next Toys for Bob Spyro game, whatever that is, or the handheld games. I don't know, whatever one comes first, I guess. So, yeah, this isn't the last we'll see of the dragon, and, bye. I don't think these things are enough to hurt, like, actually... Could you have not come at the worst time possible notification? I might start doing outtakes just because of that.